All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Friday, and I'll be presenting my research. This is about China Mongolia relations with a special focus on the mining industry, as you can read from the slide. So, as you guys know, Mongolia has been experiencing tremendous economic growth, and the reason for this is because of its booming mining industry. This is actually of particular relevance because the main customer of Mongolia's minerals is actually China. So then I thought, it would definitely be very interesting to examine these two countries' relations, but with a special emphasis on this one particular industry. So that's essentially my research, which is ongoing, and I hope to give you a brief look on it in the next few minutes. Before I actually begin, I wanted to point out these pictures that you can see. So this is Batuga, the current Mongolian president. This is the previous Mongolian president, and this is the previous one. And one thing all of these pictures have in common is, Xi Jinping and Putin, Xi Jinping and Putin, Xi Jinping and Putin. Which is like an interesting thing I wanted to mention is that as Mongolia's democracy advances, you can see how its neighboring countries, Russia and China, they're still on their same governments, which I thought was interesting to point out. All right, let's get started. So my research and the sequence that I'm following. So I choose to begin this research by exploring China and Mongolia's relations through the Yuan dynasty and the Republic of China. Well, this is all stuff that we have already covered in class, but all I just want to mention is that this is more than 1,000 years of bilateral relations between these two countries. And I cannot really think of other two pair of countries in the world that have such long history of relations. So I thought that was very interesting. And then this is something that we have been covering actually last Wednesday in a lecture, which is the investment that has been coming from the Soviet Union and China during 1911 when Mongolia was kind of independized, and then 1989, which is when the Soviet period ended. And then what I'm gonna focus on my presentation today is gonna be on Mongolia's mining industry today, of course, and then the effect that this has on the GDP growth, on the balance of trade, on environmental harm, and some of the effects that I can bring to, which is xenophobia, which I actually mentioned in my paper, not in the presentation. So please read my paper if you're interested in. And then finally, I want to think about the future, what that implies for Mongolia's democracy, for sustainability, and of course, relations with its two neighboring countries, as you can see in that picture in there. So Ulaanbaatar, this city, as you can see in this picture, has experienced a lot of growth. Well, you cannot really see the growth, but you can see the beautiful city that it is. And why did I include this picture? Because this is actually a nice way to begin my presentation, because I want to speak about all of the side effects that the mining industry has produced in the country. So let the news headlines speak for themselves. So Mongolia's mining industry today, what's the fuss about this industry that is driving such a big economic growth in this country? So let's take a look at a map of Mongolia, which I have created, and I selected very specific points around it. So in yellow, I'm depicting gold mines. In gray, I'm depicting coal mines. And in brown, the single copper mine there is in there. So let me just show you two the border crossings in there, which are very relevant. I'll speak about them in a second. Then the Trans-Siberian Railroad that connects China to Russia via Mongolia. And all right, let's begin with the Erdenet mine, which is up there in the north. A fun fact about this mine is that it has the fourth largest copper reserves in the world. Just that is outstanding. Then we will continue with two mines also in the north that produce gold. This is Boro and Gazur. And I'll take this opportunity to point out something that I've done in this formatting is that when I depict something in blue, that means that it is a locally owned mine, which is Erdenet is a Mongolian company, while in violet it is a foreign company. So in this case, OZD is actually from Singapore. Then also in the central north, you have Changanatal mine, which has 1.17 billion tons of coal. That is an outstanding amount of mineral It is crazy. And also Prophecy, I think it's a Canadian company that is managing that mine in there. And then Tavan Tolgoi mine, one of the most important mines in the Gobi Desert. And well, it's managed by two Mongolian companies. And again, it has an insane amount of coal reserves. The same is the case with Obot Tolgoi mine in the south, in the Gobi. And then, last but not least, the last spot in there is the Oyu Tolgoi mine. And if there's one thing I would like you to remember from this presentation and from this mine in particular, is that Oyu Tolgoi mine contributes to 30%. 30% of what? Of Mongolia's GDP. Just that one mine. And as you can see, it has reserves for 2.7 million tons of copper and 1.7 million ounces of gold. So all along this map, I think the general idea that I'm giving you is that Mongolia is a very rich mineral country. And that is particularly relevant because, well, China is buying a lot of those minerals from Mongolia. So one would believe that China is kind of depleting Mongolian resources. But, well, that's something I'm going to speak about in my paper afterwards. But like these mines, particularly these three that are depicted in the red boxes, are particularly relevant because look how close they are to the border. It's just a very, well, not very quick, but like a relatively short drive to like these border crossing points. So, and also before I actually continue, I want to point out that Mongolia produces 10% of the world's coal, coal production. And China buys of this 10%, 82%, which means that China from Mongolia gets 8.2% of the world's coal. So just imagine, it's hard to imagine this magnitude, but for me, when I first read this fact, I thought it was outstanding. So let's continue with some of like the implications, well, that this has on the GDP and on the balance of trade. So here we have a few pictures that illustrate that. I'd like to point out this background picture. I included a plane because, well, planes export stuff, and of course this one is called Genghis Khan. All right, so exports, as you can see, coal, copper, and gold account for the biggest percentages of Mongolia's exports. And if you add up, as I mentioned in there, all of the minerals, that is actually 82%. So as of 2017, 82% of Mongolia's exports are minerals, which is outstanding. This such a high dependency on on commodities. Then here we see Mongolia's exports, but we'll see who is actually buying them. And China is responsible for 76% of them, which is again a very, very big number. And here, well, in this graph, what I'm illustrating is what is the percentage of how does mine production contribute to GDP and to like the exports. And this is data for 2009, so it's not very well updated. But I want to say that mine production in 2009 was 60%, which is a lot, such a high dependency on a country's GDP. And then, well, some of the imports that I just wanted to mention this really quickly is that Mongolia imports a lot of refined petroleum, which it brings from Russia because they don't really have refineries back home. And you could relate this to like energy. So Mongolia, one of the things that Mongolia is doing with the revenues from mining is actually investing in energy, solar panels, wind farms, which, well, one would call this sustainable development. And since we're in imports, I wanted to see, well, China and Russia, they mostly contribute to roughly the same amount of imports in Mongolia. But what I wanted to mention, if you see like that very small rectangle in there, that is Argentina. Argentina's small imports into Mongolia, and that's 0.05%. I thought that was interesting. Argentina actually exports cheese to Mongolia. I learned this last week. Fun fact. And here the balance of trade, of course, Mongolia has had a very positive balance of trade, at least for the last 4 years, which is very important. So now what are some of the consequences? You can see already from the news headline in there. Like all of this economic growth is fantastic, but what is actually causing Mongolia? So I'll let the news headlines speak for themselves. And here I'm speaking also about the threats to Mongolia's democracy. And now get ready for the one of my favorite article headlines. So let's speak about the effect. Here's a few extracts that I've taken from some articles that that explain the points that I want to make. I'm just gonna pass them real quick. Pause the video if you want to read them because I want to get to something else right now. Well, here's something I'd like to point out about the Gini index. Is that I don't really understand economics, but I do know that if the Gini of a country, the Gini coefficient is increasing, that means that well, society is becoming more unequal, which says a lot about how Mongolia is actually distributing the income that is receiving from all of these this mining boom. So, well, these are some decisions that the government will need to take in the future about if they want to create a more equal society. But so far, the trend doesn't seem to be good. So yeah, so let's speak about some of the social consequences of Mongolia's mining industry. Of course, there's creation of new jobs, this one in particular that I show in that picture, which are like truck drivers that drive from, well, the mines to the border crossings. And that is actually a job that pays twice as much as the median salary in Mongolia, which is very outstanding. However, it's a very sacrificed job because sometimes you might be in 10-kilometer truck lines waiting for days to only cross the border. Then you have ninja mining. Ninja mining, one of the reasons why it occurs is as a result of satiating, in particular, China's mineral drives, and that is also a very dangerous like job to have. And of course, you have income inequality. Environmental, there's a lot of like herding consequences because herding patterns are affected by like suddenly putting a mine because like animals need to cross by and they can't. And then, of course, there's water supply because communities, they need water, towns need water, but all that water is taken towards a mine and it's polluted. And this is particularly relevant because Mongolia is not really a country that is abundant in water. So this is something to point out. And of course, environmental degradation because all of this is leading towards desertification, as you can see in that picture in there. And finally, a small note on economic consequences is that China is the the biggest trading partner of Mongolia. So if China suddenly decides not to buy stuff from Mongolia, then it's game over. In fact, China suddenly controls. I mean, they can control how many of these trucks are actually crossing from Mongolia to China with the coal. So yeah, that is very relevant. And of course, the single commodities because you're depending on world fluctuation on the prices of copper, gold, and coal, as you can see in those pictures. And that suddenly the GDP of Mongolia can change drastically, as I think it did in 2008, that they had to ask for help for the IMF and the World Bank. And I'd like to wrap up my presentation with this nice picture here, which is a picture of looking into the future because Mongolia's future is actually very promising. There's a lot of economic growth, a lot of income. The question is how is the country gonna manage all of these resources, all of this growth, all of this money, if it's gonna be sustainable, if it's gonna be at the expense of environmental degradation, and of course the question of China, which I'll be speaking more about in my paper, because you cannot really depend on one single trading partner. Well, I hope you like this, and if you're interested, please let me know, and we can speak more about it. I can send you my paper when I have it done. I hope everybody has a beautiful Friday.